Gunshots echoed across the Tennessee hills as Union soldiers stormed the Confederate camp. Major Robert Harmon led the charge, his men moving with deadly precision through the morning mist. "No survivors," he ordered, believing the intelligence that this was a strategic military target. 3 days later, surveying the charred remains of Oak Ridge Village, women and children among the 37 dead, he realized how catastrophically wrong that intelligence had been. Arizona Territory, 1874. Sarah Jennings ran barefoot across the desert hardpan, the remains of her wedding gown fluttering behind her like a tattered ghost. Blood stained the once pristine fabric, her blood. The distant barking of hounds told her Edward Blackwood's men weren't far behind. She'd fled her wedding night bed when Blackwood stepped away, fled the bruises forming on her skin, the belt marks on her back, the cold promise in his eyes that this was just the beginning. Her gambler father had sold her to settle a debt, and Blackwood had claimed his property with cruel efficiency. Through the pre-dawn shadows, she spotted a modest homestead. Her strength failing, Sarah stumbled toward the porch where a graying man sat reading a Bible, a Winchester rifle across his knees. Robert Harmon set his Bible aside, instincts honed by years of combat instantly alert. The woman could barely stand, her blonde hair matted with dirt and blood, blue eyes hollow with exhaustion and fear. "I'm not clean anymore," she whispered before collapsing forward. Robert caught her, memories of another broken body in his arms flashing briefly. A small girl with blonde braids, caught in a fire of his making. He pushed the memory away and carried the unconscious woman inside. "They'll be looking for me," Sarah said the next morning, her voice steadier as she wrapped her hands around a tin cup of coffee. "Edward Blackwood, my husband." Robert's hand stilled at the name. "Blackwood? The rancher from Georgia? We were married yesterday. My father gambled away everything, including me." Her knuckles whitened. "Blackwood hurt me. Said I belonged to him now that the papers were signed." Robert studied her. 25 perhaps, but with eyes that had seen too much hardship. "Blackwood controls the sheriff, most of the territory. Not many would stand against him." "Are you one of those who won't?" A bitter challenge in her voice. The smart play was giving her a horse and sending her on her way. 9 years he'd spent building this quiet existence, burying his past. But something in her defiance in those haunted eyes made the decision for him. "I've faced worse than Edward Blackwood," he said finally. Reverend Thomas Grant arrived as Robert was teaching Sarah to saddle Willow, his dappled gray mare. "Blackwood's men are searching every homestead within 50 miles, Grant announced without preamble. His sharp eyes took in Sarah's presence. "Miss Jennings, I presume. Your father was found dead in Blackwood's private jail 3 days ago." Sarah's face drained of color. "Dead? How?" "Officially suicide. No one believes that." Robert watched grief flicker across Sarah's face, quickly controlled. She didn't ask if her father had suffered. Instead, did he leave anything behind? An odd question, Robert thought. Grant seemed to notice too. There were rumors he'd been seen at the old Harrow silver mine, originally owned by Blackwood's former partner, who died under suspicious circumstances last year. Sarah's head snapped up. "My father mentioned a treasure map the day before he told me about the marriage. I thought he was drunk, but he said our fortunes were about to change." "Perhaps he found something Blackwood once buried," Grant suggested. "Enough to kill for," Robert agreed. "Enough to force a marriage to keep control." Grant moved closer, lowering his voice. "Blackwood's not just after her, Robert. His men have been asking questions about you. Specific questions about Tennessee, about 1864. Robert went still, memories surging like blood from a reopened wound. "He knows then." "Knows what?" Sarah asked, looking between them. Robert's gray eyes met hers directly. "That I was there, Miss Jennings. I was in Tennessee in '64. I was the officer who ordered the attack on Blackwood's unit, the attack that led him to burn Oak Ridge Village in retaliation. Sarah stared at him, struggling to reconcile this with the man who had shown her nothing but kindness. You. I didn't know there were civilians in the area. Intelligence said it was a military target only. Pain flashed across his features. 37 dead. Women and children mostly. I led the burial detail myself. A blonde girl no older than 6, still clutching her doll. The room fell silent. Robert felt the weight of the past pressing down, the ghost that never quite left him. So Blackwood isn't just after me, Sarah said finally. He's after you too. Which means we need to move fast, Robert said grimly. That night, a single rider approached the homestead. Robert positioned Sarah in the root cellar with a revolver while he waited on the porch, rifle ready. The rider wasn't one of Blackwood's men, but a Mexican ranch hand named Miguel who worked nearby. He dismounted in a hurry. "Senor Harmon," he said quietly, "Blackwood's men attacked my family's camp this afternoon. They were looking for the woman." Robert tensed. "Your family?" "They are safe. We hid the children in time. But they killed 2 of our goats and said they would return tomorrow." Miguel hesitated. "There is more. They mentioned Tennessee and a fire. They said you have much to answer for." After Miguel left with supplies and ammunition for his family, Robert returned to find Sarah examining a small handkerchief with her family crest embroidered in one corner. "My mother's on," she explained. "One of the few things I have left of her." Robert studied it. "Your father mentioned a treasure map. Could something be hidden in this?" Sarah ran her fingers along the edges, pausing at a slight bulge in the hem. Using Robert's pocket knife, she carefully separated the stitches, revealing a tightly folded piece of paper. It showed mine tunnels with an X marked at a specific junction. Below was written 37-1964. "A combination, perhaps?" Robert suggested. Sarah stared at the numbers, recognition dawning. "No, a date, April 19th, 1864. Robert's face paled. "The day of the attack, the day Blackwood burned Oak Ridge Village. 37 victims," Sarah added. "Robert, I think my father found evidence of what really happened that day." The abandoned Harrow mine entrance loomed before them, darkness swallowing the fading daylight. They'd ridden hard, knowing Blackwood's men were closing in. "Stay close," Robert warned, lantern held high as they entered. "Old mines are treacherous." They followed the map to a junction where 3 tunnels converged. Sarah spotted it first, rocks stacked too neatly against one wall. Robert removed them, revealing a cavity containing a metal box. Inside was a leather-bound journal and military reports. Robert opened the journal, his expression darkening as he read. "This belonged to Captain James Harrow, Blackwood's second-in-command." He looked up, face grim. "Sarah, the massacre wasn't retaliation. It was planned. Blackwood had been looking for an excuse to attack Oak Ridge for months. The villagers were suspected of helping Union sympathizers. He used your attack as justification for something he already intended?" "Yes, and there's worse." Robert turned a page. Harrow describes it in detail. "They surrounded the village before dawn, set fire to buildings, then shot anyone who tried to escape." Sarah took the journal, reading aloud. "April 19th, 1864. Executed Blackwood's orders. Primary objective elimination of Union sympathizers accomplished. Secondary casualties higher than anticipated. Final count 37 dead. No survivors as per Blackwood's directive." She looked up, horror washing through her. "No survivors as per Blackwood's directive. He wanted them all dead." "And Harrow documented everything," Robert said, examining other papers. "Military reports never filed, letters expressing concern about Blackwood's actions, even a list of the victims with their ages." His voice caught. "The youngest was 4. This is why Blackwood killed my father, why he wanted to control me. Sarah's decision was immediate. We need to take this to the federal marshal in Tucson. Robert nodded. But first we need copies, insurance in case we don't make it. As they emerged from the mine, shots rang out. One bullet splintered rock inches from Sarah's head. "Back inside," Robert shouted, drawing his revolver. Three of Blackwood's men were positioned on the ridge above. Robert fired twice, hitting one. The others ducked for cover. "There's another exit," Robert said, pulling Sarah deeper into the mine. "An old air shaft leads out behind the ridge. I discovered it years ago when I was exploring the area." They navigated the narrow tunnels, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. The air shaft was tight, barely wide enough for Robert's shoulders, but it led them to safety. As night fell, they made their way to the church in Redemption, the small town nearby. Reverend Grant was waiting, his face grave. "Blackwood's gathering men," he warned. "By morning, he'll have enough to burn this town to the ground if necessary." Robert handed him the documents. "Make copies, hide them throughout the church. Then we need to send telegrams to the federal marshal and the territorial governor." "What if they don't arrive in time?" Sarah asked. "Then we make our stand here," Robert replied. "Better to go down fighting for something that matters than to run forever." Dawn broke with Blackwood and 20 men surrounding the church. Inside, Robert positioned himself at one window, Sarah at another. Grant, despite Robert's protest, took up a shotgun and covered the back door. "Major Harmon," Blackwood called from outside, "I know you have my wife and my property. Send them out now, and perhaps I'll be merciful." "We have evidence of your war crimes, Blackwood," Robert shouted back. "Telegrams have been sent to the federal marshal and the territorial governor. It's over." Blackwood's response was immediate, a volley of gunfire that shattered the church windows. Robert and Sarah returned fire, picking off men who tried to approach. The firefight continued, minutes stretching into what felt like hours. A bullet found Robert's side, but he kept fighting, his movements measured and precise despite the blood staining his shirt. When Blackwood's men breached the back door, Grant fired his shotgun, taking down two before a bullet caught him in the shoulder. He stumbled but stayed upright. "Go, Sarah," Robert ordered, seeing the church was about to be overrun. "Take the evidence and get out through the vestry. Remember your promise." Reluctantly, she fled with the satchel of documents, escaping through a narrow door that led to the cemetery behind the church. But as she reached the gate, a voice froze her in her tracks. "Going somewhere. Sarah?" Edward Blackwood stood between her and freedom, his revolver aimed at her heart. His formerly immaculate suit was dusty, his face streaked with sweat, but his eyes were cold and clear. "It's over, Edward," she said, playing for time. "The evidence is already out there." "Perhaps," he allowed, "but witnesses die in unfortunate accidents." He extended his free hand. "The satchel, Sarah. Now." "And then what? You kill me anyway?" "Not necessarily. You're still my wife. Demonstrate proper obedience, and perhaps we can begin again." The suggestion made bile rise in her throat. "I would rather die." "That can be arranged. But first, the satchel." Sarah knew she had seconds to decide. Blackwood would kill her regardless. But if she could create an opening... "Fine," she said, feigning resignation. "You win." She slowly lowered her revolver, letting it dangle from her finger. As Blackwood's attention fixed on the weapon, she hurled the heavy satchel at his face with all her strength. He staggered back, momentarily blinded. Sarah dove for her fallen revolver, rolling as Blackwood fired blindly. The bullet kicked up dirt inches from her head. She came up in a shooting stance, just as Robert had taught her. No hesitation. When the moment comes, hesitation will get you killed. Sarah fired twice. The first shot went wide, but the second found its mark. Blackwood jerked backward, crimson blooming on his chest. For a moment, they stared at each other. The monster who had terrorized so many, and the woman who finally stopped him. Then his legs gave way, and he collapsed. Sarah approached cautiously. Blackwood was still alive, barely. His eyes, when they focused on her, held no fear, only cold fury and disbelief. "A woman," he managed, the words wet with blood. "Killed by a woman." "Not just any woman," Sarah replied steadily. "A woman who refused to be a victim anymore." His hand twitched toward his fallen revolver, a final futile attempt. Then his eyes fixed on something beyond Sarah, and the last breath rattled from his lungs. Inside the church, the gunfire had stopped. Sarah turned to see Robert limping toward her, one hand pressed to his bleeding side. Behind him came Grant, his arm in a makeshift sling. "It's done," she said simply. Robert looked down at Blackwood's body, then back at Sarah. In his eyes, she saw not judgment, but understanding, and something like pride. "Yes," he agreed, "it's done." 6 months later, Sarah stood on the porch of what was now their homestead, watching the sun rise over the desert. The air was cool and clear, autumn giving way to winter. The evidence they'd found had sent ripples through the territory. Federal marshals had arrested Blackwood's remaining men. The military had officially exonerated Robert, confirming he'd acted on faulty intelligence with no knowledge civilians were present. For Robert, the official clearance meant less than the personal peace he'd finally begun to find. The nightmares came less frequently now. Sometimes he even laughed, a sound that still surprised them both. They had married 4 months ago in Grant's rebuilt church, the townspeople attending not out of curiosity, but respect for what they had endured and overcome. Robert joined her on the porch, moving easier now that his wound had healed. He handed her a cup of coffee, their fingers brushing. "I used to watch the sun rise and see only another day to get through," he said quietly. "Now I see possibilities." Sarah smiled. "My father once told me that even in the darkest night, dawn always comes. It was the only true thing he ever taught me." Robert's hand found hers. "He also led you to me. Perhaps that was his real gift." In the distance, riders approached, Grant bringing supplies from town, accompanied by Miguel and his oldest son, who had become regular visitors. "Any regrets?" Robert asked suddenly. "About staying? About this life?" Sarah considered the question. "No," she said finally. "No regrets. This land taught me who I really am, what I'm capable of." She squeezed his hand. "And so did you." The lines in Robert's face softened. The ghosts would never completely leave either of them, but they had learned to live with them, to build something new from the ashes of the past. As they stepped forward to greet their visitors, the morning light transformed the desert from silver to gold. A daily miracle neither took for granted anymore. Behind them lay shadows, acknowledged but no longer controlling. Before them stretched the future, uncertain but faced together. And for now in this moment, that was more than enough. It was everything. Folks, that's our story for today. I've often wondered what it takes for a man to face the demons of his past. Is it courage, necessity, or sometimes is it the hand of someone who sees your worth despite your failures? What about you? Have you ever had to confront the ghosts you thought you'd left behind? What gave you the strength to do it? Let me know in the comments below. Next week, I'll bring you the tale of a Korean War veteran who returns home to find everything changed, except the battle still raging in his mind. Until then, this is your host signing off. Remember, it's never too late to rise from the ashes of your past.